The origins of the Adeptus Astartes trace back to the early days of the Great Crusade, a galaxy-spanning campaign initiated by the Emperor of Mankind in the 30th millennium. Their creation was not a random act of biological engineering, but a calculated response to a fractured and war-torn galaxy. The goal was unification, through conquest if necessary. Humanity had scattered across the stars during the Dark Age of technology, only to be plunged into an era of anarchy during the Age of Strife. Reuniting this fragmented species required more than diplomacy, it required superhuman warriors. The foundation of the Adeptus Astartes lay in earlier experimentation, particularly in the creation of the Thunder Warriors, prototypes used during the conquest of Terra. These warriors, though immensely powerful, were unstable and short-lived. Their flaws were fatal in a long-term campaign. The Emperor, alongside the clandestine efforts of the Mechanicum from Mars and his own gene-forging adepts, initiated the creation of 20 Primarchs, genetic superleaders intended to command future legions. When these Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy by unknown forces, the Emperor turned to their genetic material to construct the first true Space Marines. These were the Legions Astartes, soldiers created from human stock, improved with tissue engineered from their respective Primarch's genome. Each Space Marine is transformed through a painful and extensive process that spans years. Recruits, usually adolescent males in their early to mid-teens, are selected for physical fitness, psychological resilience, and genetic compatibility. The implantation of 19 specialized organs, known collectively as gene seed, reshapes their physiology. These include enhancements such as the Biscopea, which enlarges muscle mass, the Osmodula, which alters bone structure, and the Laramans organ, which allows instant blood clotting. Other organs grant enhanced respiratory function, multispectral vision, or even the ability to enter suspended animation. By the time the process is complete, a full Adeptus Astartes stands over 2 meters tall without armor, weighs several hundred kilograms, and can operate in hostile environments for extended periods without food, water, or rest. Their skeletal structure is far denser than baseline humans, reinforced by a second layer of ceramic-like tissue. Musculature is thicker, more elastic, and more reactive. Reaction time is significantly improved, often cited to be twice as fast as a standard human under stress. Their neural pathways are also augmented by a form of synaptic acceleration, granting them greater capacity for reflex-based actions. Space Marines also experience significantly altered biochemistry. Many are capable of spitting acidic bile, breathing underwater through internal membranes, and even absorbing memories from consumed flesh through the omophagea, one of the more arcane and poorly understood organs. Once initiated, the Adeptus Astartes are organized into chapters, each operating with a degree of autonomy and ideological variation. This system, established after the Horus Heresy under the Codex Astartes, authored by Robute Guilliman, restricts each chapter to 1,000 Space Marines. There are exceptions. Some chapters are intentionally kept below full strength. Others, such as the Black Templars, openly defy this restriction and operate as massive crusading fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. Each chapter maintains its own fortress monastery, often located on a remote planet, asteroid, or space station. These locations serve as training grounds, genetic vaults, and spiritual centers. Despite genetic similarities, the culture of each chapter diverges significantly. The Space Wolves maintain a tribal warrior ethos, prizing instinct and individuality, whereas the Ultramarines favor structure, discipline, and civic responsibility. The Blood Angels harbor a deeply ingrained artistic and melancholic tradition, haunted by the psychic echoes of their Primarch's death. The Dark Angels exhibit secrecy, guilt, and an almost monastic hierarchy. These divergent cultures shape the behavior, strategy, and even moral outlook of each chapter. However, all Space Marines share a core code: absolute loyalty to the Emperor, unflinching duty to the Imperium, and the belief in humanity's supremacy across the stars. Space Marine combat doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Despite their relatively small numbers in comparison to the Imperial Guard or planetary defense forces, a single company of Astartes can change the course of a planetary invasion. Equipped with powered armour known as the Mark 7 Aquila pattern, though older and more specialised suits still see use, they are shielded from most conventional weapons. This armour includes advanced life support systems, autosenses for enhanced battlefield awareness, and servo-assisted joints for increased strength. Their standard armament, the Bolter, fires .75 caliber explosive rounds known as bolts. These self-propelled projectiles are designed to penetrate armour and detonate internally. Other common weapons include chain swords, plasma rifles, melter guns, and power fists. Each weapon reflects the philosophy of direct, brutal efficiency. Vehicle support ranges from the ubiquitous Rhino transport to Land Raiders, Storm Ravens, and repulsor tanks. Many chapters maintain dreadnoughts, ancient warriors interred in armoured sarcophagi, who continue to serve even after mortal injury. The hierarchy within each chapter is rigid but functional. The chapter master oversees all operations and represents the ultimate authority. Beneath him are captains, each leading one of the 10 companies. Within companies, squads are led by sergeants, with apothecaries, tech marines and chaplains serving specialised roles. Librarians wield psychic powers sanctioned by the Imperium and operate under tight scrutiny. The chief librarian manages psychic operations and reports psychic anomalies to the Order Hereticus when needed. Chaplains serve as spiritual leaders, maintaining morale and conducting rites. Tech marines, trained on Mars, maintain the chapter's war machines and armour. Training is relentless and continues throughout a marine service. Recruits are subjected to both physical trials and psychological indoctrination. They learn not only battlefield tactics, but also the history and rituals of their chapter. Many rituals are performed before and after battle, ranging from anointing weapons with sacred oils to conducting solemn rites for the dead. Some chapters practice complex rites of purity, gene seed harvesting, and symbolic acts of atonement. These rituals reinforce loyalty, discipline, and a sense of eternal struggle. Behaviourally, the Adeptus Astartes display traits often interpreted as inhuman. Empathy, doubt, and fear are chemically and psychologically repressed. They are capable of emotion but express it through the framework of duty and sacrifice. Their minds are engineered for single-purpose action, honed through decades of war. While capable of leadership and strategy, most Astartes operate on instinct reinforced by countless hours of simulation and live combat. They sleep rarely, consume nutrient paste in small amounts, and view pleasure or rest as distractions from their sacred cause. The philosophy of the Adeptus Astartes is deeply intertwined with war. To them, combat is not only a necessity but a form of communion. The battlefield is their cathedral, and the act of battle is often treated as a ritual expression of their purpose. However, not all chapters are equally spiritual. Some view their role in more pragmatic or strategic terms. Others, especially those with strong connections to their Primarch's legacy, treat their existence as a divine obligation. Technology is revered but also feared. Most chapters do not fully understand the machines they use. Maintenance and repair are conducted through ritualized forms passed down through the Tech Marines, who receive training from the Adeptus Mechanicus. Logistically, the Adeptus Astartes operate independently from most of the Imperium's bureaucratic systems. Each chapter controls its own recruiting grounds, training facilities, forges, and genetic archives. Resupply often comes from tithes, conquest, or alliances with nearby forge worlds. Some chapters maintain orbital shipyards and fleets capable of supporting extended campaigns. Despite their autonomy, they are technically bound by the High Lords of Terror. In practice, many chapters act with near-sovereign independence, choosing when and where to intervene based on strategic priorities or ancient oaths. Among the most critical elements of a chapter's sustainability is the gene seed. This collection of 19 engineered organs determines a chapter's future, both biologically and symbolically. Each organ must be harvested from fallen or aging space marines and cultured within apothecarian vaults. These facilities, often buried beneath the deepest levels of a fortress monastery, are sanctified chambers where medical technology and sacred ritual intersect. Apothecaries are entrusted with the collection, preservation, and implantation of gene seed. Should a gene seed line begin to show mutations or degradation, the entire chapter may face sterilization or extinction. The cursed founding and the failure of chapters like the Flame Falcons or the Sons of Antaeus serve as warnings against careless gene manipulation. Each chapter's organizational doctrine is shaped by the Codex Astartes, though its interpretation varies. Ultramarines and their successors follow the Codex with near-religious precision, structuring themselves into 10 companies, each with 100 Marines. The first company consists of veterans clad in Terminator armor, elite warriors used in siege-breaking and last-stand situations. The 10th company is composed entirely of scouts, initiates not yet fully implanted with all gene seed organs. The remaining companies rotate through battle duties, with the 2nd through 5th designated as battle companies. The 6th through 9th are reserve companies, often specializing in assault, devastator, or tactical configurations. This structure is not universal. The Space Wolves reject the Codex in favor of a tribal system built around great companies led by Wolf Lords. The Black Templars function as a dispersed crusading host, lacking fixed command companies. The Death Watch, composed of Space Marines seconded from various chapters, uses kill teams with unique, mission-specific compositions. While these variations exist, all forms are centered on operational flexibility and battlefield dominance. Space Marine armor is more than a defensive shell. It is a symbol of rank, tradition, and lineage. Variants of power armor reflect technological development and battlefield necessity. The oldest in use is the Mark II Crusade pattern, followed by the Mark III Iron and Mark IV Maximus. Each carries subtle advantages such as reinforced plating or mobility upgrades. The standard remains the Mark VII Aquila, which balances protection, modularity, and ease of maintenance. Some elite units wear Terminator armor, formerly known as Tactical Dreadnought armor. These suits are slow but nearly impervious to conventional fire. Intercessors of Primaris lineage wear Mark X armor, utilizing gravitic stabilizers and enhanced servo motors. The distinction between Standard Astartes and Primaris Marines emerged during the final days of the 13th Black Crusade. Primaris Marines, engineered by Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Caul under secret instruction from the Emperor, were introduced to reinforce and stabilize failing chapters. These warriors possess improved gene seed, greater physical size, and enhanced equipment. Some traditional chapters embraced them immediately, while others viewed them with skepticism. The Blood Angels, long plagued by genetic flaws, received them with both hope and concern. The Space Wolves questioned their loyalty and spirit. Integration remains ongoing, with some Primaris Marines forming entirely new chapters such as the Silver Templars. Among the most revered figures in Adeptus Astartes history are the Primarchs themselves. These 20 individuals, 18 of whom are historically accounted for, were the templates for their respective legions. Their physical forms surpassed even the Astartes, standing over 3 meters tall and displaying powers that bordered on the divine. Each Primarch embodied unique traits: Robute Guilliman's strategic genius, Leman Russ's feral aggression, Vulcan's endurance, and Sanguinius's nobility. Their fates are diverse. Some, like Guilliman, survive and continue to lead. Others, such as Ferus Manus and Horus, were slain in battle. 2 remain lost to history, unspoken by Imperial decree. The loyalty or betrayal of a Primarch shaped the destiny of entire legions during the Horus Heresy. Their influence remains active. Statues, sacred texts, and war chants ensure that every battle fought by a chapter carries echoes of its progenitor. The Ultramarines still revere Guilliman's words as operational gospel. The Salamanders model their humanitarian values after Vulcan's legacy. The Raven Guard embrace stealth and sabotage, a reflection of Corvus Corax's guerrilla mindset. Even traitor legions, though shunned by Imperial doctrine, continue to shape the psychological warfare faced by loyal chapters. Cultural expression within the Adeptus Astartes is neither uniform nor idle. Some chapters embrace forms of ceremonial artistry. The Blood Angels in particular produce frescoes, statues, and illuminated manuscripts. Their artisans decorate tombs, armour, and even drop pods with baroque designs reflecting the duality of beauty and death. The Dark Angels cloak themselves in symbolism, using robes, iconography, and secret chambers to preserve their internal mysteries. The White Scars compose battle poetry in High Gothic, etched into the hulls of their bikes and speeders. These customs are not decorative, but integral to identity. They bind warriors across centuries of service. Chapter rituals are solemn and purposeful. Initiation involves harrowing trials, survival in death worlds, gladiatorial combat, and mental conditioning. Aspirants may spend months in isolation or face psychic projection of their worst fears. Upon acceptance, each recruit undergoes the rite of initiation, a formal ceremony marking the beginning of implantation. Later rituals include the rites of battle, conducted before major engagements. These often involve litanies of war, the recitation of chapter history, and the consecration of weapons. The Feast of Blades, practiced by some successor chapters, involves ritual duels to determine command roles or resolve internal disputes. Behavioural tendencies of the Adeptus Astartes include extreme detachment, controlled aggression, and instinctive prioritization of mission objectives over individual life. Their ability to suppress pain, hunger, and emotion makes them effective yet alien. Civilians often view them with awe and terror. Interaction is minimal, as most chapters avoid civilian exposure except in necessary operations. Some, like the Salamanders, are exceptions, offering protection and aid to the worlds under their care. Others, like the Mortifactors or Flesh-Tearers, instill fear even among Imperial populations. Space Marine instincts are oriented toward action. Hesitation is rare, and when it occurs, it is often followed by immediate self-correction. They are taught that uncertainty is a failure of discipline. Their decision-making relies on logic, protocol, and accumulated battlefield experience. In practice, many Astartes function as both tacticians and frontline soldiers. A single squad often operates independently for weeks, analysing threats, conducting raids, and performing surgical strikes. They are not blunt instruments, but honed blades applied with precision. Certain internal divisions exist within chapters, often tied to experience, role, or origin. Veterans of the first company may be centuries older than newly inducted primaris. Some chapters maintain internal cults or honor guard sects, such as the Sanguinary Guard of the Blood Angels or the Death Wing of the Dark Angels. These groups carry additional responsibilities, specialized wargear, or knowledge of secret histories. While loyalty to the chapter overrides personal ambition, friction occasionally arises from perceived favoritism or deviation from tradition. The interaction between the Adeptus Astartes and the wider Imperium is complex. They are considered both servants and watchdogs. While technically beholden to the High Lords of Terror, many chapters operate as independent military states. They are summoned by astropathic requests, inquisitorial commands, or ancient pacts. However, response is not guaranteed. Some chapters prioritize personal crusades or oaths made to fallen comrades over formal orders. This autonomy has caused conflict with the Inquisition, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Astra Militarum. In some instances, entire planetary campaigns have been compromised by the refusal of a chapter to submit to centralized command. Technological philosophy within the Adeptus Astartes is marked by reverence and pragmatism. They view their wargear as sacred relics, often naming individual weapons and machines. Maintenance is conducted through ritual and incantation, overseen by tech marines trained on Mars. However, most space marines do not fully understand the technology they wield. They trust in its function rather than its mechanics. Relic armor, rare plasma constructs, or ancient dreadnought sarcophagi are treated with nearly religious awe. Failure to recover such equipment is considered a grave dishonor. The deployment of specialized units reflects tactical flexibility. Devastator squads carry heavy weaponry to suppress enemy armor and fortifications. Assault squads use jump packs to close distances and breach enemy lines. Tactical squads, the most common, blend firepower and maneuverability. Terminator squads operate in close-quarters environments, especially in ship-to-ship boarding actions or hive city sieges. Bike squads and land speeder units provide rapid response and flanking ability. Vanguard and River units, often composed of Primaris Marines, emphasize stealth and infiltration. Dreadnoughts are among the most solemn and revered assets of any chapter. These towering war engines are not simply machines but tombs, sarcophagi that contain the remains of mortally wounded Space Marines. Only those who have shown extraordinary valor and tactical brilliance are interred. Once placed within, the warrior continues to serve, guided by the machine's systems and sustained by complex life support functions. However, the price is steep. Over time, the mind of the interred deteriorates, slipping between lucidity and madness. Most dreadnoughts are awoken only for major conflicts, or when their tactical knowledge is required. Between battles, they are placed in stasis within ancient vaults, honoured as living relics. The most common variants include the Castroferrum pattern dreadnought, a broad-shouldered machine with power fists and assault cannons. More advanced are the Contemptor and Leviathan dreadnoughts, faster, more resilient, and capable of engaging entire armoured divisions. Primaris dreadnoughts, like the Redemptor and Brutalis variants, offer further adaptability with improved weapon stabilization and aggressive mobility. Each dreadnought is a blend of ancient design and modern application, and every chapter customizes its armaments based on doctrinal needs and available resources. Beyond dreadnoughts, Space Marine chapters deploy a wide range of mechanized support. The Land Raider is perhaps the most iconic, capable of transporting Terminators into the heart of battle, while shrugging off enemy fire. Variants such as the Crusader and Redeemer adjust their weapon loadouts for anti-infantry or siege operations. The Repulsor and Gladiator tanks, Primaris-era constructs, use gravitic propulsion and offer fire support across open terrain. Flyers such as the Storm Raven and Thunderhawk serve in rapid deployment, aerial assault and atmospheric insertion missions. Many chapters maintain their own fleet elements, including strike cruisers, battle barges, and escort vessels capable of system-wide operations. These fleets are supplied and maintained with limited external assistance, relying instead on tech marines, chapter serfs, and long-term supply pacts. Chapter serfs serve in non-combat roles, maintaining weapons, delivering logistics, and attending to administrative functions. These individuals are often descendants of those saved by the chapter generations earlier. While they lack gene seed, they are educated, loyal, and trained to operate under strict protocols. Some serfs act as scribes, chartists, or even medical aides under apothecarian supervision. In certain chapters, particularly those with knightly traditions like the Black Templars, serfs may form their own internal orders of honour-bound service. Leadership within the Adeptus Astartes remains fiercely meritocratic. Advancement is earned through performance, not inheritance or popularity. However, tradition and favour from senior officers can influence selection. Captains must demonstrate not only battlefield excellence, but the ability to maintain discipline and uphold chapter values. The Master of the Forge, Chief Apothecary, Chief Librarian, and Ecclesiarchal each lead their respective domains, answering only to the chapter master. These senior roles form the chapter's inner council, coordinating strategic decisions, long-term planning, and inter-imperial relations. Several Adeptus Astartes have achieved renown across the galaxy. Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines, wielding the gauntlets of Ultramar, has led campaigns across half a dozen sectors and survived encounters with hive tyrants and chaos lords alike. Dante of the Blood Angels, the oldest living space marine, has served for over a millennium and currently leads the Imperium Nihilus as Lord Regent. Kaivan Shrike of the Raven Guard rose to chapter master following the death of his predecessor, bringing with him a renewed emphasis on stealth and misdirection. Azrael of the Dark Angels carries the Lion Helm, an artifact of unknown origin believed to be connected to the chapter's long-lost primarch. These figures are more than tacticians, they are living symbols of their chapter's purpose and survival. Rituals surrounding their command are deeply symbolic. The ceremony of ascension, conducted upon promotion to captain or chapter master, includes the recitation of oaths of absolution, the anointing with sacred oils, and the presentation of relics. Chaplains play a central role in these events, serving as keepers of tradition and judges of worth. Librarians conduct psychic assessments to ensure the candidate is not tainted by warp exposure or uncontrolled ambition. Failure in these rites is rare but catastrophic. Candidates who falter may be reassigned, isolated, or even terminated depending on the chapter's law. Psychic presence within the Adeptus Astartes is strictly regulated. Only sanctioned psychers, known as librarians, are permitted to harness the warp. Their powers include battlefield abilities such as force projection, telekinesis, and precognition, as well as more subtle uses like memory extraction or long-range communication. The Librarius is overseen by the Chief Librarian, who coordinates battle psychers and ensures compliance with Imperial law. Despite their value, librarians are often distrusted by their brothers. The potential for corruption through warp exposure is ever present, and suspicion runs deep. Most chapters enforce rigorous mental conditioning, requiring librarians to undergo cleansing rituals, dream interrogation, and mind warding before each deployment. Technology philosophies among the Astartes differ. While all revere the Omnissiah in some form due to their reliance on Martian knowledge, interpretations vary. The Iron Hands view flesh as weakness and strive for cybernetic perfection. The Salamanders, by contrast, balance technological mastery with human compassion. Their artificers are considered among the finest in the Imperium, capable of crafting weapons, armour, and relics of unmatched quality. In rare cases, individual chapters recover or rediscover lost technologies, often in the form of archaeotech or STC fragments. These are turned over to the Adeptus Mechanicus or hidden, depending on the chapter's policy and trust in the wider Imperium. The philosophical outlook of the Adeptus Astartes is built on certainty. They believe in hierarchy, in sacrifice, and in the eternal war for humanity's survival. Few question orders, even fewer entertain self-doubt. Their psychological profiles are shaped by centuries of war, indoctrination, and chemical reconditioning. They do not mourn comrades as humans do, but honour them through ritual and vengeance. Death is not an end but a transformation, either into memory or into the machinery of war. Despite their detachment, every Astartes bears emotional scars. The fall of a brother chapter, the death of a primarch, or the betrayal of a once trusted ally leaves marks that cannot be erased. These are rarely spoken aloud. Instead, they manifest in renewed fury, solemn silence, or acts of private penance. Some carry physical scars, others the weight of command decisions that resulted in civilian loss or the failure of an entire campaign. These burdens are borne without complaint. Chapters under long-term siege, like the Crimson Fists or the Lamenters, develop even deeper layers of fatalism and resilience. Surviving constant attrition, dwindling gene seed reserves, and the threat of extinction sharpens their focus into something close to fanaticism. They become ghost legions, fighting without hope for recognition, yet upholding the same oaths as their more celebrated peers. The technology, culture, and military prowess of the Adeptus Astartes are designed for one purpose: to protect humanity. Yet they remain distant from it. They are symbols of what humanity can become, and reminders of the cost. Every world they save, every enemy they destroy, and every relic they guard is a piece of a war that has lasted for 10,000 years. The Adeptus Astartes do not seek peace. They are not defenders in the traditional sense. They are weapons, crafted, honed, and aimed, waiting for the next war to justify their existence. Their loyalty is unquestioned. Their wrath is relentless. Their history is long but not complete. every chapter, every company, every brother carries forward a strand of a greater legacy, one that began on Terra with the Emperor's vision and continues across the stars under banners forged in fire and blood. As long as the Imperium stands, they will endure, and when it falls, they will be the last to leave the battlefield. The earliest formal documentation of the Adeptus Astartes can be traced to the dawn of the Great Crusade, recorded by the Proto-Administratum under the direct authority of the Emperor's own Council of Unity. While oral histories and planetary records from pre-compliance worlds sometimes reference the arrival of giant armoured angels or skyborne executioners, the first verified entry appears in the Administratum's campaign ledger for Terra, year 30,000, when the Emperor initiated Operation Unification. This document, sealed in the Hall of Triumph beneath the Imperial Palace, notes the deployment of the Legions Astartes in the conquest of Pan Pacificus and the eradication of the techno-barbarian warlords of Ursh. Although earlier prototypes such as the Thunder Warriors were documented in segments of the Terran archives, the formal appearance of Space Marines in Administratum records coincides with their large-scale deployment. These early entries are meticulous, often compiled by attached remembrances, lex mechanics, and chartist scribes who recorded battlefield outcomes, logistics reports, and gene seed tithe returns. A recovered communique dated from the 8th year of the Great Crusade records the deployment of the 5th Legion to the planet 67 Delphin Prime, resulting in a compliance ratio of 100% within 5 standard days. Casualty reports were listed as negligible, with attached notes on post-combat pacification protocols for surviving planetary governors. The Adeptus Mechanicus, then operating under the Treaty of Mars, also began issuing their own classifications of Astartes deployments, not from a tactical perspective, but as technical observers cataloguing machine spirit behaviour and armour resilience under fire. These data slates now reside in the central archives of the Noctis Labyrinth, sealed under red-level Martian clearance. A recovered fragment dated from the conquest of Goro records the performance of early Mark IV armour under plasma exposure, with annotations by the Fabricator General expressing concerns about the machine spirit harmonics of integrated Auspex arrays. Such records were not made public but circulated among Forge worlds, refining the armour patterns used throughout the Crusade. Throughout this period, the Administratum began implementing classification codes for Legion operations, assigning letter-numerical designations based on planetary resistance, Xenos presence, and projected population compliance. The Astartes quickly established a pattern: high-efficiency deployment in extreme resistance environments. Dozens of worlds submitted without prolonged siege due to rapid orbital assault, precision strike doctrines, and psychological shock. A recurring note across multiple planetary conquest reports reads, "Compliance achieved within 72 hours, enemy leadership terminated, civil infrastructure preserved." These tactics allowed for rapid assimilation of critical trade routes, agri-worlds, and industrial planets without protracted conflict. Administratum data from Millennia 31 indicates the largest documented deployment of Space Marine forces occurred during the Ulanor Crusade. While most accounts emphasize the Emperor's victory over the Orc Empire, internal communiques from the Departmentum Munitorum detail the strategic role played by the Astartes in seizing void fortresses and planetary bastions in advance of the final assault. The deployment of the Lunar Wolves, led by Horus Lupercal, is recorded in over 45 separate invasion logs, with casualty ratios consistently reported at under 2%. Mechanicus observers attached to the fleet noted performance anomalies in Terminator pattern armour in low-gravity environments, data that later influenced armour adjustments during the Siege of Terra. Following the Ulanor campaign, Administratum records begin to shift in tone. Observers start noting deviations in Legion behaviour, particularly in the Night Lords, World Eaters, and Alpha Legion. These early discrepancies are not marked as heretical, but are flagged with the term strategic divergence. A memorandum from the Calix Sector Tactici College states that the 8th Legion employed fear-based suppression methods in violation of Compliance Codex doctrine. These behaviours were logged but not acted upon, as the Imperium was more concerned with expansion than internal conformity. First recorded tensions between the legions Astartes and the Administratum bureaucracy appear in the closing years of the Great Crusade. Records from the 321st Crusade fleet detail several instances where planetary tithes were adjusted downward due to interference from Astartes commanders who reprioritized military logistics over economic output. One such entry refers to the intervention of the Iron Warriors on Hellsreach, where the planetary governor's resource requisitions were overwritten by direct Astartes command, bypassing standard protocols. The result was increased fortress construction, but a collapse in regional agri-output, an outcome the Administratum flagged as strategically effective but economically disruptive. Gene seed monitoring protocols became standardized around this time. The Biologies Divisio of the Mechanicus began issuing standardized purity scores, with each chapter's apothecarian required to submit gene seed samples on a periodic basis. The Mechanicus archives list recurring anomalies in certain legions, most notably the Blood Angels and the Space Wolves. The former's samples were marked by recurring psychic imprints, later interpreted as early signs of the Black Rage. The latter's genome included stability issues associated with organ adaptation, listed under a Mechanicus Codex term meaning acceptable divergence. Post-heresy reforms initiated by Robert Guilliman introduced a new era of bureaucratic oversight. The breaking of the legions into chapters, outlined in the Codex Astartes, was enforced through formal documentation, with each newly formed chapter required to submit foundational doctrines, fleet manifests, and command hierarchies to the Administratum. This period saw the formal registration of over 1,000 chapters, each receiving a numeric designation, sector assignment, and tithing code. The original scrolls recording these formations are still housed in the Hall of Records on Terra, preserved beneath adamantium plates, and guarded by a full regiment of the Adeptus Custodes. One of the earliest documented deployments of a post-heresy chapter involved the Crimson Fists during the Harkonnen cleansing. According to Munitorum-led campaign archives, a single company of Crimson Fists held a fortified bastion for 39 days against a planetary uprising. Attached scribes recorded real-time combat logs, later used in recruitment broadcasts across Segmentum Solar. The campaign's resolution was recorded as strategically decisive, but internal Administratum notes suggest concern over the chapter's attrition rate and delayed gene seed harvest recovery. A recurring point of analysis across Administratum data is the imbalance between the strategic power of Space Marines and their numerical scarcity. Statistical models produced by the Officio Strategos indicate that while a chapter may account for less than 1,000th of the Imperium's armed forces by number, its battlefield impact is disproportionate. On average, a full Space Marine company generates an impact ratio of 1/500 compared to standard Astra Militarum regiments. This has led to repeated strategic debates within High Command, particularly during crises where Astartes forces are requested but unavailable. Administratum complaints regarding Astartes independence appear across multiple sectors. Recorded examples include refusal to coordinate with planetary governors, destruction of civilian infrastructure during counterinsurgency operations, and the execution of ecclesiarchal officials for alleged heresy without formal trial. While some of these actions are later validated by the Inquisition, they remain contentious. A particularly notorious example is the record of the Carcharodon's intervention during the Thoas cleansing. Administratum scribes recorded no formal declarations, communication, or follow-up. The chapter arrived, eradicated the ruling class, destroyed 8% of urban infrastructure, and departed without explanation. The report ends with the phrase, "action assessed as effective," further clarification deemed impractical. Mechanicus documentation of Astartes operations is notably more technical. Forge worlds such as Risa, Lucius, and Graia maintain sealed logs of chapter deployments, voidcraft maintenance cycles, and wargear requisitions. During the campaigns in the Ghoul Stars, Mechanicus observers catalogued the performance of grav weaponry introduced into Primaris support units. These reports note stability under heavy fire, successful deployment in null-gravity boarding operations, and high praise for auto-targeting algorithms refined by Call's research. The data was submitted to the Martian archives but flagged under restricted access due to integration irregularities. These early chapters, newly armed with Primaris technology, were dubbed the Ultima Founding. Administratum records show rapid deployment to war zones previously considered unassailable. One entry from the Defense of Vigilus details the arrival of the Raptors chapter, where Primaris intercessors neutralized an orc-armored column using coordinated suppression fire and gravitic maneuvering. Attached Mechanices notes indicate no armor failure and zero machine spirit interference, an anomaly in extended engagements that sparked interest in standardizing the design. One of the most thoroughly recorded large-scale deployments of Adeptus Astartes forces in the post-heresy era is the War of the Beast, documented extensively by both the Administratum and the Forge worlds affected by the conflict. This war, taking place during the middle of the 32nd millennium, began with the sudden and coordinated appearance of a vast orc empire, united under an unknown leader referred to in multiple transmission logs as the Beast. Entire segmentum solar territories were overrun. Internal Mechanicus archives record the destruction of Forge World Ardamantua within 13 hours of initial contact, with no known survivors. The Administratum's Departamento Strategica issued a rare extinction-scale threat designation for the Beast War. Records show at least 11 Space Marine chapters were committed to the conflict, with at least 4 confirmed to have been wiped out entirely. Notably, the Imperial Fists suffered catastrophic losses. The death of Chapter Master Corland led to a restructuring of their command hierarchy and the founding of the Last Wall Protocol, a contingency strategy documented in the Vaults of the Phalanx, the Imperial Fists fortress ship. This protocol, recorded in Imperial Tactical Archives, authorized the temporary unification of all successor chapters of the Imperial Fists lineage to form a composite force reminiscent of their original legion. These forces were coordinated via encrypted astropathic signals recorded in Mechanicus data vaults and triangulated through relay stations within the Sol system. The war concluded only after multiple failed offensives and the eventual boarding of the Beast flagship by a combined force of Astartes and Imperial operatives. Final casualty reports list over 70 billion Imperial dead, not including Mechanicus personnel or planetary militia. While the war's conclusion was marked as a strategic victory, multiple internal memos from the Administratum suggest lingering concern about the autonomy of chapter actions during the campaign. Several reports flagged the Black Templars and the Fists Exemplar for acts of unauthorized orbital bombardment, specifically over the agri-world of Verot's Rim. The attacks resulted in a 9-year famine and the deaths of over 8 million civilians, an incident still classified under Imperial Records Act Red Sigil priority. Another high-profile conflict extensively documented was the First War for Armageddon, a critical battle involving the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights. According to the Administratum campaign ledger for Millennia 38, year 131, the demon Primarch Angron manifested in full warp-corrupted form, leading a World Eater's force onto the industrial world of Armageddon. The initial invasion destabilized orbital command, forcing Imperial forces into a defensive posture. Transcripts from the Munitorum list at least 8 regiments of the Astra Militarum overrun within the first 72 hours. The Grey Knights, acting under Order Malleus sanction, were deployed alongside several inquisitorial strike teams. They coordinated planetary exorcism protocols with surgical precision, recorded in Mechanicus combat broadcast logs retrieved from destroyed Auspex relays. The Space Wolves, who had already been present on World, engaged the demon host directly, suffering significant casualties. According to post-action reports, the combined Astartes forces successfully banished Angron using coordinated psychotriangulation, melter deployment, and massed bombardment of corrupted terrain. However, the aftermath of the battle triggered a major bureaucratic dispute. Due to the exposure of planetary defense forces and civilian witnesses to demonic manifestations, inquisitorial orders mandated planetary-wide memory cleansing, and, in some sectors, full-scale exterminatus. The Space Wolves opposed this, and a standoff occurred in orbit. Munitorum records cite over 25 hours of tense negotiations before a partial withdrawal was agreed upon. The official record lists the incident as resolved without incident, but sealed correspondence between the Administratum and the High Lords of Terra includes recommendations for increased surveillance of Space Wolves' fleet movements going forward. Mechanicus observers attached to Macarian fleets also documented the use of prototype teleport beacons, supplied via Riser, to support Space Marine deep strike operations. Internal reports state that over 70% of deployed devices performed at optimal levels with minimal machine spirit resistance, a rare outcome for Martian devices of that complexity. Post-war analyses suggest that Astartes' precision strikes allowed Macarius to sustain momentum far beyond projected thresholds. However, several reports from planetary governors indicate post-conquest challenges, as some Astartes forces refused to remain for planetary stabilization or refused to communicate with regional Administratum officials during reconstruction. One of the more controversial military operations in recent millennia was the Badab War, a civil conflict among chapters themselves. Administratum records show that the Astral Clause, under Luft Huron, refused repeated requests to submit gene seed tithes, triggering an escalating dispute with the High Lords of Terra. After multiple failed attempts at diplomacy, a task force was formed composed of multiple loyalist chapters, including the Red Scorpions, Firehawks, and Raptors. Campaign journals logged by Administratum scribes detail over 19 years of drawn-out naval combat, void sieges, and planetary assaults in the Maelstrom Zone. The Mechanicus maintained a fleet presence to observe and catalogue armour variants, wargear usage, and fleet battle outcomes. One such report, Mechanicus Archive designate Beta Aleph, records the use of heavily modified Contemptor dreadnoughts by the Astral Claws outfitted with advanced microshielding and warp inhibition plating not recognised in any standard STC patterns. After the war's resolution and the secession of Huron, later known as the Tyrant of Badab, the surviving Astral Claws were rebranded as the Red Corsairs and declared traitor forces. The Administratum's closing report designates the Badab War as strategic anomaly and internal breach of chapter cohesion, with recommendations to strengthen oversight of all gene seed tithe returns. The 13th Black Crusade, initiated by Abaddon the Despoiler, marks another major moment in documented Astartes history. The fall of Cadia is catalogued in great detail in both Administratum and Mechanicus repositories. Chapters such as the Imperial Fists, Black Templars, and the newly reinforced Primaris formations from the Indomitus Crusade were deployed in desperate defence. Detailed loss records show hundreds of thousands of Astartes casualties across multiple war fronts. Strategic data retrieved from orbital cogitators and fragmentary Auspex logs chronicle the largest coordinated warp incursion since the Horus Heresy. Mechanicus reports from Forge World Metallica detail the failure of orbital void shield batteries during the final stages of the Cadia campaign. Log excerpts from onboard tech priests confirm gravitic destabilization caused by the Blackstone Fortress's assault, classified as unprecedented and unshieldable even by the oldest Martian protocols. In response to these failures, the Adeptus Mechanicus began a complete overhaul of planetary defense systems in vulnerable sectors, based on data provided by surviving Astartes tech marines. Following the fall of Cadia, the arrival of Robote Guilliman marked a turning point in both military strategy and record-keeping. The Indomitus Crusade, launched in response to the galaxy-wide emergence of the Great Rift, involved over 100 chapters and thousands of Primaris Marines created during the Ultima founding. Administratum entries list, coordinated warp jump schedules, sequential system cleansing operations, and recovery missions for worlds stranded by warp storms. The Mechanicus provided fleet support and mass-produced new armour patterns to equip the Primaris reinforcements. These were logged under the Tetracon Standard Issue Manifest, sealed by order of Belisarius Call. As the Imperium expanded and the Adeptus Astartes continued to operate with relative autonomy, the Administratum began to produce fragmented entries cataloguing events that were either heavily classified or outright suppressed. These accounts, while sparse, offer a clearer picture of the mounting tension between Imperial bureaucracy and the Astartes' independent nature. Not every war was neatly documented, not every victory was clean. Some operations were buried beneath layers of redaction, misfiled data, or clerical obfuscation. This was not accidental. In several cases, data was deliberately withheld from general record to avoid political fallout or ecclesiarchal scrutiny. One such case involved the scouring of Gethsemane, a feral world located in the eastern fringe near the edge of the Segmentum Ultima. The event is logged only in a now decommissioned Munitorum subcodex, under the label Cleansing Action Alpha 35. According to recovered transmission fragments, a detachment of the Red Talons conducted a full-scale extermination of the planet's population after discovering widespread genstealer corruption within the planetary aristocracy. No civilian transports were granted evacuation. The accompanying Mechanicus observers requested additional time to extract several xenotech artifacts for study, but the request was ignored. Within 17 hours, the planet was subjected to viral bombardment. The official record lists the incident as a biohazard containment action and seals the operation under the Inquisitorial Secrecy Protocol. However, cross-referenced Vox recordings and astropathic fragments suggest the genestealer presence had not yet spread to the planetary populace in full. When asked for clarification, the chapter's response was limited to 3 words: threat level absolute. No inquiry was ever launched, and the Red Talons received no disciplinary sanction. Further bureaucratic tension is seen in the Pantea skirmishes, a series of minor conflicts that took place across 12 planets during the mid-41st millennium. Administratum field officers recorded multiple complaints from planetary governors regarding Space Marine operations that bypassed local chain of command. One instance involved the Raptors chapter, deploying orbital strikes against suspected cultist strongholds on Avlex Prime. The strikes were highly effective, but several manufactorums and grain silos were destroyed in the process. Civilian casualties numbered in the tens of thousands. The planetary governor attempted to lodge a formal complaint through Segmentum Command, only to find the communications relays permanently deactivated after the Astartes departure. Mechanicus scribes present during the conflict noted unusually silent tactical behaviour from the Raptors, who conducted the operation with minimal external comms or administrative notification. One Magos tasked with monitoring the Raptors' gravitic armour enhancements recorded that the unit's transponder beacons were deactivated for nearly 4 days. When questioned, the chapter denied deactivation, claiming atmospheric interference. The Mechanicus issued a quiet warning to the Forge World responsible for the Raptors' equipment, requesting that future suits include passive monitoring subroutines. Whether that request was implemented remains unknown. A rare case of cooperative yet problematic deployment occurred during the Castrel Novum War, where multiple Space Marine chapters engaged an Orc invasion, alongside Astra Militarum and Titan Legion forces. While the Orc Empire was successfully dismantled, internal Mechanicus notes refer to disruptive interference from the Marines' Malevolent chapter. Their direct assault on an Orc-held manufactorum during a coordinated multi-faction siege caused the premature ignition of unstable promethium stores. The resulting explosion annihilated not only the Orc defenders, but also 2 Titan support cohorts and 3 regiments of the Death Corps of Krieg. The incident was filed in Administratum archives as friendly fire resulting from unauthorized engagement order. The aftermath saw sharp internal debate within the Munitorum. While some tacticians praised the effectiveness of the strike, others condemned the Marines' Malevolent for ignoring pre-established assault timetables. When questioned, the chapter's commanding officer reportedly responded with a one-line transmission: "Speed is loyalty." Although the war was officially declared a victory, internal memos highlight the growing concern that some chapters operate with an understanding of loyalty not aligned with Imperial doctrine, but rather their own interpretation of martial honour. The Obscuran Rift incident marks another highly suppressed engagement. While little information exists in standard Administratum codices, references to a Darkhold purge operation appear within sealed Mechanicus diagnostic logs, an astropathic spillover in the Black Library's outer indices. The operation involved an unnamed chapter, possibly a secretive descendant of the Raven Guard, executing a full-scale assault on a rogue Forge world that had begun experimenting with Xeno's integration protocols. Mechanicus records indicate that the Forge's central data core, known as the Hexalogica Mind Vault, had become partially sentient and begun splicing Eldar Wraithbone circuitry with human cogitator stacks. According to surviving machine imprints, the Astartes strike force destroyed over 98% of the Forge world's infrastructure, including research facilities and data stores. While the operation prevented further technological heresy, it also eliminated vast swaths of rare data, some of which was considered viable for long-range comms encryption. Internal Mechanicus communiques labelled the action as a tactical overreach, and filed a classified appeal to the Lords of Mars for greater restrictions on Astartes involvement in techno-retrieval operations. The appeal was ignored. During the Ecclesiarchal Wars, which spanned nearly 70 years of border conflict, multiple chapters conducted joint actions without proper synchronization with the wider Imperium. One key report details the Salamanders and the Mortifactors conducting simultaneous cleansing operations on the same world, Nivalis Tri, without coordinating fire zones. The result was a near-fatal friendly fire incident that decimated 2 Astartes squads and destroyed valuable Mechanicus terrain mapping devices. Despite surviving combat logs clearly documenting the error, neither chapter issued a formal apology. Instead, both submitted their own versions of the operation's outcome, each claiming independent success. The Administratum was forced to file 2 separate reports for the same engagement, leading to a data mismatch that remains unresolved to this day. Geneseed tithe violations continue to be a focal point of suppressed documentation. While most chapters adhere to standard tithing protocols, at least 15 known deviations have been flagged by the Adeptus Mechanicus over the last 5 millennia. In one documented case, the Executioner's chapter returned geneseed samples that contained minor anomalies in the zygote cohesion organ, leading the biologies to suspect long-term degradation. However, the chapter denied the anomaly, citing handling error by transport servitors. Despite cross-confirmation from 2 Forge World labs, no punitive action was taken. This tolerance is viewed internally as a political compromise. The Mechanicus, though the guardian of geneseed purity, lacks the military leverage to enforce tithe corrections without High Lord backing. The final years before the Indomitus Crusade see a growing volume of restricted access entries tagged with Astartes Discretionary Operation. These entries refer to actions where chapters deployed without explicit approval or notification, often in response to perceived warp anomalies, Xenos sightings or ancient oaths. These missions are marked by incomplete data trails, missing supply logs, and redacted battle outcomes. A notable example is the Silent Bastion breach, believed to have occurred near the Halo stars. Multiple Forge worlds reported energy spikes and void battles, but no follow-up entries exist. Internal memos from the Office of Astropathic Harmonics note a full week of signal distortion coinciding with the event, but no one officially claims involvement. The cumulative weight of these incidents has led to quiet reforms within the upper levels of the Administratum and Mechanicus. Several restricted initiatives, such as Operation Null Crown and Protocol Orison, appear in encrypted traffic logs, believed to be early frameworks for tracking Astartes deployments more closely. Whether these protocols succeeded is unknown. What is clear, however, is that the Adeptus Astartes, while honoured and indispensable, remain partially outside the full grasp of Imperial bureaucracy. The concluding records of this chapter suggest a slow pivot in Administratum tone. Where once the Astartes were logged as ultimate strategic assets, later entries begin to describe them as unpredictable variables. Phrases such as mission effectiveness overrides protocol, strategic value versus administrative risk, and code deviation tolerated appear with increasing frequency. The Mechanicus echoes this shift, focusing less on enforcement and more on adaptive reporting, indicating a reluctant acceptance that Space Marine operations cannot be governed entirely by static logic or formula. They remain loyal but not obedient, effective but not predictable. Their impact is unmatched, but their oversight is incomplete. As the galaxy continues to fracture under the weight of warp storms, Xenos threats and civil instability, the Adeptus Astartes operate where the Imperium systems cannot. The Administratum writes the wars, the Mechanicus logs the machines, but the Astartes write the outcomes, with bolt, flame, and the quiet indifference of those who were not born, but made for war. Internal dossiers held within the Order Hereticus and Order Malleus record the Adeptus Astartes not as paragons, but as assets with variable risk potential. These documents, compiled over thousands of years from classified field reports, interrogations and post-combat analyses, present a starkly different tone from the reverence of the Administratum or the technical assessments of the Mechanicus. The Inquisition, bound by no loyalty to any specific Imperial arm, has long maintained the position that the Astartes represent both the Imperium's greatest bulwark and one of its most dangerous independent variables. Psychological profiles stored in the Vault of Judgment beneath the Inquisitorial Fortress on Samothrace confirm what has been long suspected but rarely spoken. The psychological stability of the Adeptus Astartes is conditional, not absolute. While hypno-conditioning, neurochemical reinforcement and cultural indoctrination produce remarkably uniform behaviour, these tools are not infallible. Inquisitor Vehem of the Ordo Hereticus led a 3-decade-long study on Astartes trauma response following post-combat deployment. His findings, catalogued under file string Kiar Astartes Resilience 13, indicate that approximately 23% of subjects demonstrated suppressed psychological strain manifesting as hyperaggression, lucid memory fixation, or self-imposed isolation. These symptoms were especially prevalent in chapters with extended siege deployments or repeated contact with warp anomalies. The Order Malleus maintains an even more guarded repository. Several recovered accounts of demon encounters detail behavioural shifts among deployed Astartes forces, particularly librarians. One redacted report from the Fortress Exorcism documents a librarian of the Crimson Castellans hesitating during psychic engagement, momentarily entranced by an unidentified warp entity. Post-combat examination showed no signs of corruption, but subsequent deployment logs note unusual lethargy, fragmented speech, and recurring dreams referencing an echoing voice behind the veil. The Astartes in question was eventually returned to his chapter without formal accusation, but the inquisitorial file remains marked with an amber threat tag and is updated annually. These subtle markers rarely reach the surface, but their cumulative presence has led to a growing subcorpus of inquisitorial protocols centered on what is referred to as Condition Eramus, a codified guideline for assessing Astartes who exhibit potential deviation without clear cause. Eramus-class cases do not warrant immediate purgation, but instead initiate long-term surveillance, including proximity monitoring, astropathic eavesdropping, and behavioural audit trails. Approximately 9 chapters have at least one known Eramus-class entry as of the end of Millennia 41. The identities of these chapters remain sealed, even from segmentum-level oversight. Further documented anomalies involve psychic interference in areas traditionally shielded from such effects. During the Descent of Valikan, a campaign led by elements of the Nova Marines, inquisitorial observers stationed aboard the fleet reported ambient psychic bleed not traced to any known librarian signature. The Inquisition's Psychana teams logged 7 separate moments of spontaneous dissonance, oral hallucinations, unexplained temperature drops and short-term memory gaps across vessels with no librarian presence. A full sweep of the fleet yielded no warp breach or taint, but one fragmentary Auspex log recorded a Terminator-clad Astartes entering a sealed room alone and emerging 70 minutes later with no memory of the event. The Inquisition redacted the entire segment from the final campaign dossier and ordered the chapter to submit its entire librarius for reassessment. the Nova Marines complied without resistance. Other entries reflect less metaphysical but equally concerning patterns. One restricted report compiled by Ordo Xenos agents during the Basilian campaign noted an instance where a group of Primaris intercessors abandoned their assigned objectives to pursue what they believed to be a lost relic of the Unification Wars. No official order was given. Upon retrieval, they presented the object, a fragmented, scorched cogitator core wrapped in ceramite, to their chaplain, who declared it a false relic and ordered its destruction. Inquisitorial witnesses observing the scene from hidden Vox links recorded a visible hesitation from the Marines, followed by synchronized compliance. One intercessor, upon private debriefing, claimed to hear a memory of terror emanating from the object. The claim was dismissed as an after-effect of concussive trauma, but the unit was quietly placed under long-range passive surveillance for 2 standard years. Instances involving full-scale deviation are rare but not unprecedented. The Steel Cobra's chapter, once a respected scion of the Salamander's gene line, was declared excommunicate after a decade-long investigation by the Ordo Hereticus revealed a systemic redefinition of their theological structure. Internal records showed a gradual abandonment of Imperial creed and replacement with a doctrine of eternal vigilance against all flesh, wherein human civilians were treated as spiritually inferior and functionally disposable. While the chapter maintained surface-level compliance and successfully repelled 4 major Xenos invasions, hidden transcripts found within confiscated Vox archives confirmed a growing internal belief that human suffering served as a purifying force to strengthen the chapter. The Hereticus declared the chapter terminally corrupted and ordered their destruction. The execution order, codenamed Operation Cracked Fang, was carried out by a combined force of the Exorcists and the Ordo Hereticus task group Theta Venari. The last transmission received from the Steel Cobras reads only, "We have become what you feared, and we were right." A growing area of interest within the Inquisition is the long-term effect of Primaris integration on pre-existing chapters. While most accepted the arrival of the new warriors without open resistance, several reports detail internal fractures. A now suppressed communique from an Inquisitor stationed with the Flesh Tearers records an incident where original Firstborn Astartes refused to acknowledge Primaris officers as their equals. This led to operational disobedience during a boarding action, resulting in a failed breach and the death of multiple Astartes. The incident was logged as a miscommunication under fire, but attached notes indicate inquisitorial concern regarding gene line arrogance and rank rejection. The long-term cohesion of mixed chapters remains an active topic within Ordo Chronos predictive modelling programs. Another suppressed observation relates to unknown chapters that appear without record or formal origin. The Inquisition has documented at least 5 such appearances in the last 3 millennia. These units display full gene seed compatibility, operational combat doctrine, and access to modern wargear, but no recognised founding or bureaucratic lineage. One such group, referred to in fragmentary Mechanicus logs as the Pale Blades, participated in the defence of Exos Prime, repelling an entire Tyrannid splinter fleet with no request for support or recognition. Attempts to contact or follow the group failed. The Inquisition's recommendation: observe and delay action until confirmation of origin can be made. A private memo within the Ordo Astartes includes the warning, "Not all chapters may be ours." Among the most deeply classified documents in the Ordo Hereticus vaults are reports involving confrontations between Space Marines and other Imperial factions, incidents considered so volatile that their very acknowledgement is limited to internal inquisitorial circles. These confrontations are rarely open conflicts, but rather high-stakes standoffs, jurisdictional disputes, and, in extreme cases, armed engagements resulting in casualties on both sides. One such confrontation, known internally as Operation Silent Verdict, involved an extended standoff between the Black Templars and an Ecclesiarchal convoy on the shrine world of Gloriana Ascendant. The Adeptus Sororitas had arrived to consecrate a series of martyr shrines established following an Orc incursion. The Black Templars, believing the site had been desecrated by warp-tainted relics, uncovered during reconstruction, barred entry, and declared the area under purgation protocols. A formal escalation began when the Sisters deployed defensive lines around the central cathedral and requested arbitration from the Ordo Minoris. Inquisitorial observers arrived within 2 days and diffused the standoff without violence, but multiple internal memos note that the Black Templars refused to lower weapons throughout negotiations, even after the Order of the Ebon Chalice initiated liturgical compliance rites. The final Inquisition assessment flagged the chapter's growing inflexibility, regarding ecclesiarchal oversight as a moderate instability factor. An even more troubling episode is recorded in the sealed archives of the Ordo Xenos under the title The Gravantis Anomaly. A Deathwatch kill team operating under Inquisitor Corvax was engaged in a deep infiltration of a Genestealer cult uprising on the mining world of Gravantis Delta. During the final stages of the operation, a detachment of Raven Guard arrived without warning, initiated immediate orbital bombardment of the Hive's central spire, and eliminated over 90% of the population in less than 16 hours. The Deathwatch team, still present in the lower Hive during the strike, suffered heavy casualties. Inquisitor Corvax submitted a full protest to the Raven Guard chapter master, who responded with a brief message. The rot was too deep. The Internal Inquisition Review noted the mission as compromised by parallel objectives, but refused to label it as direct insubordination. Corvax was reassigned, and the event remains a point of tension in internal Astartes Deathwatch integration protocols. Notably, the Raven Guard provided no post-action data, and the orbital logs used to track their fleet vanished from Mechanicus registers within weeks. Conflict with the Astra Militarum has also occurred, often over command hierarchy and the Astartes' refusal to subordinate to theatre command structures. During the Cypra Mundi retaliation, a detachment of the Crimson Fists ignored a direct order from Segmentum Command to delay engagement until civilian transports could evacuate. The Astartes instead launched a full assault on the traitor-held city of Darnak Hold, citing time-critical intelligence indicating the presence of a warp breach conduit. Their actions prevented the warp rift from expanding, but resulted in over 30,000 civilian deaths due to structural collapse and uncontrolled firestorms. The Inquisition's review was split. Some praised the strategic necessity, while others flagged the Crimson Fists as combat optimal but politically tone-deaf. The incident led to the temporary revocation of the chapter's engagement clearance in the Segmentum Pacificus, though this was later reversed under Guilliman's reinstated Astartes High Mandate. Regardless, internal conversations within Ordo Civitas suggest that civilian loyalty in the Cypra system dropped significantly following the incident, a development tracked closely by the Officio Prefectus. Inquisitorial observers have also documented instances where Astartes forces engaged indirectly with rogue elements within the Inquisition itself. A rarely referenced incident codenamed Vault Veil involved a confrontation between the Exorcists chapter and a radical Ordo Malleus conclave that had begun experimenting with captured demon hosts as predictive tools. The Exorcists, informed via unknown channels of the conclave's operations, initiated a full assault on the hidden facility deep within the Bastion Perdure on Veil. The Exorcists terminated the conclave, destroyed all data cores, and performed ritualized immolation of the remaining warp constructs. The operation was retroactively sanctioned after a review by the Ordo Astartes and select Grandmasters from the Ordo Malleus. The most significant note in the declassified version of the report is that no Inquisitor who voted against the retroactive authorization remains alive today. Whether their deaths were coincidental or orchestrated remains unconfirmed, but a correlation between their disappearances and Exorcist's fleet movements exists in several warp travel records marked for deletion. One of the most sensitive and ongoing points of analysis is the potential for hidden subcults within certain chapters. While Astartes loyalty is genetically and culturally engineered, a number of Inquisition agents have long hypothesized that ideological deviation can occur slowly and undetected, particularly in chapters with unique cultural traditions. A prime example is the Space Wolves. their continued resistance to full compliance with the Codex Astartes, their internal Wolfen mutations, and their refusal to submit to conventional psychic testing have been consistent points of friction. During the Fenris anomaly investigation, Inquisitor Cadia Venn of the Order Hereticus embedded herself within a Mechanicus delegation during an annual audit of the chapter's librarius. Her report, now suppressed from standard archives, notes multiple undocumented psychers housed in subterranean vaults. These individuals were marked as under evaluation, but exhibited warp resonance levels above the inquisitorial thresholds for psyker containment. Her attempts to raise the issue to segmentum oversight were blocked, and her next dispatch recorded her departure from Fenris with the phrase, "Truth resides beneath ice." She was never seen again. Her ship, the Starfire Concord, disappeared en route to Segmentum Obscurus. No Astartes were formally accused. The Grey Knights, often assumed to be immune to scrutiny due to their unique formation under the Order Malleus, have also been flagged in specific incidents. While their anti-demonic efficacy is unparalleled, internal debates within the Order Kronos and the Order Redactus have emerged regarding the long-term psychological cost of their operations. Some Inquisition analysts argue that the Grey Knights, due to the unique nature of their psychic implantation and secrecy-enforced isolation, operate under existential pressure that could lead to instability at the individual or chapter-wide level. A redacted report authored by an anonymous source, believed to be a former member of the Ordo Kronos, suggests that at least 3 incidents have occurred wherein Grey Knights exhibited atypical behaviour following prolonged warp exposure. These behaviours included sudden aggression, vocalization of unknown languages, and a breakdown in command cohesion during extraction operations. These claims remain speculative, but the report was quietly circulated among high-ranking Malleus lords and tagged with an amber sigil warning. Interactions between Astartes and Xenos entities are typically forbidden or lethal, yet the Inquisition has recorded rare exceptions. One such record, referred to as the Equinox Protocol, describes a single incident where a chapter, possibly the Relictors, is believed to have entered into a temporary ceasefire with an Eldar Corsair fleet to eliminate a shared Necron threat. The operation took place near the dying star of Varys Ra, and was observed only through long-range astropathic resonance picked up by Black Ship monitors. No direct communication logs were recovered. However, orbital patterns, debris trajectories, and psychic bleed suggest a coordinated strike pattern across the Necron Tomb moon. The Inquisition chose not to formally investigate the matter, but issued a classified recommendation to deny further access to the region for all known Relictor forces. Later, Mechanicus exploration of the tomb site revealed no Eldar remains and minimal damage to Necron architecture, suggesting a highly surgical strike. The Relictor's official response when questioned was simply, "We ended a silence." These interactions, theoretical or suppressed, build a troubling mosaic. The Astartes are increasingly unpredictable, not because they are traitors, but because they operate according to principles and judgments that often outpace or ignore the Imperium's static command structure. In the shifting chaos of the post-Great Rift galaxy, the Inquisition does not deny their value, but it also cannot deny the growing gap between trust and oversight. As the Great Rift cleaved the galaxy in two and warp phenomena escalated across the stars, the Inquisition initiated a full archival reappraisal of all Space Marine engagements going back to the Great Crusade. This monumental effort, referred to internally as Project Oubliette, was undertaken by combined agents from the Ordo Hereticus, Ordo Malleus, and Ordo Kronos. The goal was to identify not just corruption, but pattern, behavioural, psychological, and structural anomalies across millennia. The results of this project remain heavily redacted, but certain conclusions were disseminated across restricted inquisitorial sectors. One conclusion was unambiguous: the Horus Heresy was not a unique event, but a structural inevitability. The underlying cause, hyperloyalty to individual leaders over central authority, still exists in many modern chapters. The Ultramarines, for example, continue to wield more influence than some segmentum commands. The Black Templars refuse to settle, recognizing no true chapter master beyond Sigismund's oath. The Space Wolves obey their wolf lords, not terror. These are not exceptions, they are the new norm. The heresy taught the Imperium that no amount of conditioning or honour can fully erase the martial ego or spiritual independence from the Astartes gene line. This recognition triggered a re-evaluation of post-heresy compliance protocols. Internal Inquisition records confirm that several of the missing Primarch projects were never deemed failures due to genetics alone, but due to psychological modelling that predicted unstable command relationships with the Imperium. Some within the Ordo Redactus now argue that at least 2 of the lost Primarchs may have been fully viable, but were never deployed due to modelled projections of disobedience under stress conditions. These theories remain locked beneath sealed cremator clearance levels, but their implications are troubling. The Imperium may have preemptively eliminated potential heroes to prevent the rise of future rebellions. Further inquiries into geneseed manipulation have uncovered subtle tampering in some later foundings. Files extracted from Mechanicus biovaults on Mars suggest that at least 3 Primaris geneseed lines were modified to reduce cognitive independence, theoretically producing more obedient warriors. However, early deployments show minimal difference in behaviour from their firstborn counterparts, leading some Inquisitors to suspect either sabotage or resistance at the biological level, possibly from Call himself. When asked to submit his data, Call provided terabytes of fragmented logs and indecipherable machine logic. Most were irrelevant, some were intentionally corrupted. One readable file contained a single phrase, repeated thousands of times. The Emperor needed thinkers, not drones. The Inquisition has also re-evaluated the Second Founding and the Broken Legions that birthed the modern chapters. Public doctrine claims this act was Guilliman's ultimate safeguard against another heresy, but suppressed records from the earliest Terran convents suggest multiple Primarchs opposed the move. Internal files indicate that Vulcan and Corax raised private objections, citing cultural fracture and tactical instability. These discussions never reached public record. Inquisitorial analysts now believe the decision to break the legions seeded centuries of animosity between successor chapters, seen most evidently in conflicts between the Crimson Fists and Black Templars, or among Ultramarine Scions during disputed Crusade assignments. Revisiting the War of the Beast, with this lens, the Inquisition's private commentary diverges sharply from the official account. The formation of the Last Wall Protocol is praised publicly as an example of unity, but internally it is described as a legislative failure. Inquisitorial assessments viewed it as a dangerous precedent, the reconsolidation of multiple chapters into a pseudo-legion structure, something the Second Founding was designed to prevent. One file included in the Oubliette archives labelled the event as a controlled heresy rehearsal, and concluded that the successful unification of Imperial Fist's successors under Courland proved that legions could be reformed rapidly if ideological alignment was strong enough. The final recommendation: initiate soft surveillance of all successor coordination protocols. From the Inquisition's perspective, the arrival of Robert A. Guilliman during the Indomitus era has only accelerated the risk curve. Guilliman's reforms, restoring central authority, expanding the Primaris program, rewriting Codex doctrine, have revitalized the Imperium's military strength, but they have also begun to erode the fractured independence that kept the Space Marines self-balancing. With centralized command returning, so too does the risk of centralized failure. Guilliman's influence is now unquestioned across the Imperium Nihilus and beyond. If he were ever compromised or replaced, the Inquisition predicts that the Astartes would follow him without hesitation. They would not ask questions. They would not wait for approval. They would simply act. Perhaps the most sobering documents in the archives are those that detail unrecorded chapters, not just rogue or unknown, but fabricated. A pattern of ghost deployments was detected across multiple war zones during the Noctis Eterna. Entire squads appearing on battlefields, fighting with advanced equipment and vanishing without trace. Their heraldry often bears no resemblance to any known chapter. The Inquisition's most extreme theory is that these units may be artificially generated from gene banks once thought lost, activated via pre-Imperial failsafe systems or rogue AI constructs. One account from Inquisitor Renvalis describes a squad of gold-armoured marines defending a cathedral during a chaos incursion. The locals called them the Crownless. No chapter with that name exists. No Vox records were recovered. Their wargear was never found. In rare cases, entire engagements have been retroactively purged from history. The culling of Vorok's Reach, long attributed to a chaos incursion, was reassessed after a surviving Psyker fragment revealed that the Astartes responsible had executed the world's ruling class to prevent a Scythe breach. The Inquisition deemed the action justified after the fact, but redacted the chapter's name to avoid political scandal. It is not the only example. Suppressed archives list over 100 operations carried out by Space Marines that were never intended for the Emperor's wider empire to know. Their actions remain righteous in outcome, but lawless in method. The final entries of Project Oubliette do not call for purging the Astartes. They do not suggest disbanding the chapters or replacing them with automata. Instead, they reflect a cold, calculated respect. The Inquisition sees the Adeptus Astartes for what they truly are, not soldiers, but systems. Each chapter is a self-sustaining ecosystem of belief, gene code, ritual, and function. Some verge on autonomy so complete they are effectively small empires within the Imperium. Others remain devout, structured, and loyal, but only until tested by conditions not covered by doctrine. In the closing lines of the Oubliette summary, an inquisitorial scribe writes, "They are not broken. They are not lost. They are what we made them, perfected for extinction, and we shall use them until they forget we are watching." The Inquisition knows that one day the Imperium may once again be led by Primarchs, or shattered by their memory. On that day, the Space Marines will be the sword. The question that remains is, whose throat will it be pointed at?